Good morning. I'm Kim Stumm. I'm the treasurer at Heritage Bay Golf and Country Club. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Phil Newman from RSM, a leading global consulting firm. We've invited Mr. Newman here today to share his expert insight on Southwest Florida country clubs, including their operations, finances, and budgeting. As the Heritage Bay Board of Directors works towards finalizing our budget for next year, we believe this external perspective on industry trends will help members better understand how we compare to similar clubs in the area. Thank you, Mr. Newman. Let's get started. The proposed budget for Heritage Bay includes a 10.8% increase in our member dues next year. How does this compare to other bundled golf communities, and how are they kind of dealing with the inflation in the market?
Yeah, it's first of all, it's nice to be back
Thank you.
here. And it's not surprising to hear that's where your numbers are kind of trending. And that's your total
That's
increase, right? So I think, it varies from community to community on how you get to where you end up. Operationally, we're still hearing about a lot of 7 or 8% increase just in the operating piece. So if you're below that, great. And if you're below that, it's probably because you've kept up the pace in prior years. A lot of other clubs didn't. They were very aggressive in trying to hold, and I understand it, trying to hold those dues down. But I'll tell you that probably in the last year, so 23 into 24, I've probably seen more operating assessments than I've ever seen in my career because a lot of those clubs weren't being realistic with setting the budget back then. So the fact you guys didn't have to deal with a lot of that stuff is great and hopefully helps you control the operating for this year, sets you in a good place. The reserve piece, that's totally different, and it varies so much from community to community. It depends on a couple of things. Depends on obviously the amenities that you have is probably one of the biggest things. And I know if you look at your annual financial statements, there's usually an extract of the reserve study at the back, and I know management has the option to leave it out, and that was the right option I think last year, maybe the year before, because the reserve studies were almost meaningless because of the pace of inflation that was going up. So now we're certainly seeing catch up. We're seeing quite a few 10% double digit increases in the reserve piece. And again, it depends on very much what have you done to keep the amenities up. If you're way behind, then that's a real challenge. So I think it doesn't surprise me if you're coming in at a 10% give or take increase, including the reserves, then you're probably right in line with a lot of the other competitive communities.
And that kind of leads into it. Like you say, it's two pieces. And really, the reserves are what's driving the majority of our increase. I mean, the budget increase next year, of that 10.8, only 2.6 of it is really the operating side. So, I mean, we've done a really good job of keeping that within where we're actually seeing the increase. 60% of the increase that we're talking about is really from our reserves. And so have you seen significant increases in reserves for other communities? Because that's really where we're seeing it with an updated reserve study just from 2 years ago to now. Significant increase in inflation of all the items that we have on the reserve study.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think purpose of having these conversations with you guys over the years is to help the community understand that you're not alone. Sometimes you can think you're alone out here in this beautiful part of Southwest Florida, but all the communities that you would compete with and around you are dealing with the same challenges, the same issues. The other good thing that you guys have done, you've done so much already, and this fabulous amenity that you've got here, a lot of those communities are now playing catch up. So if you look at some of the communities that have been doing, the one that springs to my mind here, Copperleaf, doing a massive project. Well, once you put those in place, that obviously affects your reserve study going forward, because now we've got big footprint, we've got what the members voted on, what the members wanted. But the upkeep, as we all know, you buy a bigger house, you got more upkeep, and it really is that sort of simple economics just coming through. So yeah, and you layer on top of that the construction costs, the heavy repairs and maintenance costs. At least the supply chain seems to be easing up. Stuff's actually showing up again when we sort of expected, right? Because I'm not sure if a lot of like the the members at large understood how badly impacted our club communities were by the supply chain, things like golf carts and whatever. So then,
We waited a year for some of our golf equipment to show up.
I believe it. So if you think of reserves, and that's such a good example, because then what does that mean? That means your team, your engineering team, whoever in every department is having to do more work and stretch things out further so the members are hopefully kept happy while you're waiting for the new stuff to come in. So there's a lot of factors going in there that drive, all of that goes into repairs and replacements, which drives that reserve number. And I think too, the other thing with the reserve number is, again, we'll see what happens. If interest rates continue to come down like it's predicted, we're going to have the change in the president, one way or the other is going to change. What's that going to do to the housing market, right? And so if it doesn't accelerate it, then we're back to the days of pre-COVID of really, you're competing here. You want people to want to come and live here. So one of the things pre-COVID that we saw all the time and we heard a lot, members were more and more potential members were looking for that, well, how good is the financial situation of the club? One of the things they looked at was reserves. So if you didn't have, reserves of any significance, then if I'm going to buy into the club and I can see that, if I can read the financials and see that, might make me think twice about, do I want to really buy in here versus the club next door that has continued to invest in the reserves, and those homeowners understand, we have a responsibility. So that's all going to come into play in the next year. So I think, the fact that you guys are taking that step to we need to set the mark here, I think it's a long-term benefit to the community.
Good. Could you discuss the role of capital dues and what is the average contribution other clubs are collecting from members for capital?
Sure. And the resale fee thing is probably the hottest topic and has been in the bundle communities like yourselves for 2 years at least. Because I think a lot of communities were looking at, for years, the bundle communities in Southwest Florida were charging to new buyers, $2,500,
Mm-hmm.
3,000 maybe. Somebody got brave and took it to 4,500, And I started getting calls from presidents of communities like you were saying, these people, they can buy in here with all the amenities we have, and the joining fee is $3,000. Versus they could go to the club next door, which is not bundled, but to join that club, they're paying 30, 40, 50. And that realization of, we're kind of leaving money on the table. And, the membership as a whole benefits from, you guys invested as a team, as a family, you invested in these facilities. The price of joining should go up. It's pretty simple, right? When the product is newer and shinier, it should cost more. And we've certainly seen that number move a lot. Our last average, and this is an average, was up to 7,500, but there's communities, I think you guys are at 10,
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of communities in Southwest Florida that are at 10, some are at 15. And I think that number again is going to be very interesting to watch. It's a fabulous mechanism when the homes are turning. When the homes aren't turning, it takes you back to your real question is well, then where does the capital come from if homes aren't turning and we're not getting those joining fees, and that takes you to capital dues. So I think 88% we deal with about 30 clubs like yourselves in Southwest Florida. I think the last time I looked, about 88% of them have an annual capital charge. Now the average is $1,200 to $1,300 a year, again, average.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got some that are significantly more than that, $3,000 plus. Some are a bit less, depends on the size of the community. So there's a lot of factors in there. But I think, the bundle communities are starting to take a lot of the economic management from the traditional clubs, that it would be rare today to find a traditional club that doesn't have a capital dues. Obviously, it's a significant joining fee. And why not? Well, why wouldn't you be the same? So, that's definitely something that's moving. But I think, how much your capital fee needs to be will then determine, obviously, what do you plan to do?
Mm-hmm.
But what then again is happening with home sales and that capital resale fee? That if homes start moving again, then the pressure comes off the capital dues. But in the absence of that, the capital dues need to go up.
Talking about that, let's look at when we look at some of the operating the last 3 quarters, our community is very active. And since the first 3 years since COVID, we've seen consistent revenue growth, whether it be in golf, F&B. However, over the last 10 to 11 months, we've actually seen a dip, anywhere between 7 to 10% in those revenue growth items, but yet our operating costs, obviously labor and so forth, are going up 3 to 5%. So have you observed similar trends in some other communities?
Yes, yes, it's one of the most noticeable things this calendar year. And I was at a club finance committee meeting 2 weeks ago, and we were kind of having this conversation. And the general manager said to the finance committee, "Yeah, we're not as popular as we used to be," joking that, yeah, the rounds are down, the usage of the club. It's not, and the summer was a big part of it. Now, I personally, and I'm going to upset a lot of people in your community, because I personally blame Taylor Swift, right? Because every American I know went to Europe this summer.
To go to her concert.
Right, and I think Europe has not shut down to Americans because of that. But in all seriousness, that it all opened up again, and I think that's what we've been hearing in some of my consulting colleagues that work in the broader hospitality space and hotels and tourism. They're saying, yeah, and you read about it. You don't have to go deep. It's right there in the Wall Street Journal or whatever. Just the number of people that are doing those kind of trips again, versus that pent up demand from COVID ended, and we started to do it. The dollar obviously was in a good place as well with the euro and things like that. So I don't know about Heritage Bay, but a lot of members at other clubs in Southwest Florida absolutely spent their dollars, if you will, on something like that. So overall, definitely seeing a decline in member usage over the last, like I said, this calendar year. But yes, yes, and it started probably into April. It definitely dropped off. Got very little. Most people left again for the summer, more than we've probably seen in more recent years with COVID. So if you're, again, like I said, you're not alone with that. How that comes back, again, you have to do the right things, which you're trying to do, which is keep the amenities and the offerings in the golf course, and food and beverage, keep it as best as you can. And like we were joking before we get started, I got stuck again behind a whole line of golf carts trying to get in here. So somebody's playing on your golf course. But yeah, I wouldn't be alarmed by the decrease. Again, you just have to be realistic about if that's what we're going to deal with, then.
And there's so many other options. I mean, just Founder Square, every time there's something new going in, and
Yeah, I just noticed there Lake Park Diner has one out here now. I was like, wow, and it's, yeah, when I might have said this last year, like I remember a lot of the people that work for me kind of live out this way, and if we do things around the office, they want to do it out here, and I'll come out to Founder Square. I'm like, where did this come from? Yeah, exactly. And you can see it, and and it makes sense with where all the other development, it's coming this way, right? So you're right, and members have a lot of choices. A lot, again, especially if you're someone that bought into Heritage Bay, like you said, 2013. That stuff was here, and now you've got all
we
those.
were out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I remember first coming out here and I thought, where is it? Where is it? Yeah, oh, there it is, but you don't feel like that at all now. You're very much in the center of the community, which is the Naples community. But yeah, that's another different challenge that, you're now in competition with a lot of those places. And some of them, as you know, are significant corporate backed enterprises that have got purchasing power that you will never compete with, in terms of the food and beverage purchasing and stuff like that. Some of them have got labor plans that you'll probably never compete with. And so there's a lot of challenges there. And like you said, the cost side, what are you going to do? The golf course has to be in the best condition you can have it in, whether you have 20,000 rounds a year or 50, right? That's the that other side of the equation. Similarly with food and beverage, and you relay it over to the staff side, all those places that are now there, that's a lot of options for your team that works here. They can look just down the street. And so, sometimes we lose sight of that. And I would always encourage, members, talk to your servers, understand what they're dealing with. Because when I do that at the places I get to frequent, it's horrifying, some of the cost challenges they're hearing about rents and stuff like that, um, we're fortunate that we kind of don't live in that bubble, you know? And then you see the inflation numbers coming down. It's great, but that's still going up, right? It's percentage on percentage. And it's all national numbers. It's not Southwest Florida. And again, we were chatting about the recent storms, and we'll talk about insurance, but that's a whole other game changer. That doesn't matter how many people come and use your golf course or your bar; those are costs that you're going to have to deal with.
And I think we're surprised to be a little bit on the golf piece.
Hmm.
We talked about food and beverage and all the options and so forth around, but it's been about 3 years we've seen some of our lowest. People say they can't get on the golf course sometimes, but that's during peak season, during January, February, March. But just the actual number of rounds have declined,
Yeah.
and that I think has been surprising for us this year.
Yeah. And I hate to say this, and your friends may not invite me back, but one of the other components of that is how your community has aged. The members have aged. So, we all get to that point where we can't play golf anymore. And that's often a demographic or a stat that we don't really want to look at, and homeowners probably don't want you looking at it. But it's a reality of, if you're going to have people that cannot play or use some of the amenities anymore, that affects the number of rounds. So there's other factors that aren't really economic. They're kind of personal to the people you have living here. And you just hope that, okay, I can't play golf anymore, but I've got other amenities that make you want to be here, right? So.
Okay. You talked about staff, and obviously staff is kind of the most important asset a community has, is the people that work here. And so, and as you talked about, it's been a challenge, sometimes with turnover and so forth. I mean, a lot of our members our employees will come from Lee County. A lot of them live there, and they'll pass 100 clubs on their way to Heritage Bay, and affordable housing in Collier County is not great.
Yep.
And so, as you think about wage increases and things like that, what have you seen in other communities?
Yeah, it's not as, what's the right word, aggressive increases as it was maybe 2 years ago. But some of the pressures that I mentioned, are still there on your staff. So we're still seeing, in a lot of cases, we're still seeing overall payroll going up 7-8%. Now, we were seeing payroll going up 10, 15+%. I think the hourly stuff, a lot of that has been dealt with, in terms of, we know what the rate needs to be. And then the next piece was the management team. And sometimes not that we overlook them, but I think the focus a lot is on the hourly labor, because it's going to be a lot of what you're paying for. But now your management team, and as far down as you want to go in that team, they have options too. But it's also, you need to be very more laser precisioned. In COVID, it was a shotgun. Everybody needed to get a chunk of change, right? And it was like everybody went up X%. Now it's more laser positioned, and saying, okay,
For this position,
for this position, exactly. And then, where do we want to be? If this is, because what we'll show you is like, okay, well, here's the average of the top 10%. Here's the average of the top 25%. Here's the average of all the clubs that participated. Where do you want to be? And a lot of people want to say, well, yeah, we don't want to be at the top end, but we don't want to be at the bottom, 75th percentile, 50, whatever, so it's, what's your methodology is important too. And I know your board and your management team have a lot of experience with that. So I think just keeping your eye on that. And it's something like, you're going to set your budget, but it's something probably quarterly, you guys should be saying, okay, how does it look? Where are we? What is the turnover and why? Because to your point about Lee County, and I think this is something that we've lost sight of, and this was a fact even before COVID, you have people working for you in some departments that will change jobs for $1 an hour. It's a huge deal to them, right? And sometimes we lose sight of that. And you're thinking, wow, they moved for $1 an hour. Yeah, why? Well, because it was, 10 miles closer to their house. And what's the price of gas doing? And those are the things, that you kind of have to, it's not easy. It's not easy, but, but overall, if you're coming back to 2.6%,
On the operating side, yeah.
you should be happy with that. So
Okay, good. Mentioned insurance. Obviously, given the hurricane season that we've had here, um, what are you seeing for insurance rates?
yeah, it's interesting. It's depends on your policy and premium and coverage. I would tell you that every club in every club in Florida, East Coast or West Coast, is effectively self-insured when it comes to damage, storm damage. We may have insurance, we may have premiums. The premiums are so big now, and the coverage is so low that, like I said, we may not want to call it that, but we're effectively self-insured. Average increases, we're seeing 20-25% easily when it comes to storm and things like that. Who knows? There's going to be another round of renewals coming up here. I just don't see it going. I think at some point the state's going to have to step in here, and we've been talking about that at the homeowner level for a long time. But when you see some of the national stories now in, like, again, the Wall Street Journal or whatever, where they're running articles upon people not wanting to live in Florida now because of the storms and stuff like that. Those are the things as a homeowner in Southwest Florida that make you sit up and realize, well, we need to deal with this, right? At some point, for whatever reason, you're going to sell your home. You want to make sure someone wants to buy it. So the insurance piece is absolutely massive. And again, a lot of that is driving, when I say I'm seeing a lot of 6, 7, 8% increases, the insurance component is a huge portion of that. If you've taken care of the payroll, which is always your biggest expense, that insurance line item's got to be the next single biggest piece that's right there. So
Okay, thank you. I think the last item that I kind of wanted to touch on is get your perspective on any innovative technologies that are out there that maybe Heritage Bay should be looking at. I've seen some different things about uh, pesticides on the golf course being with drones or some robotics. What type of things are you seeing in the industry that we should be looking at?
well, I was hoping you were going to have one of those robot waiters come and bring me my coffee here today. Brooks Burgers, right? Yeah. I haven't seen in person.
Oh, it's funny.
It's a
It
must.
brings the food.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't take your order or anything, but it will bring your food out to you. Yeah.
So I haven't seen that in any clubs that I can think of right now, but I think the golf course is the one that cries out for what can we do out there, right? Definitely seeing a lot of remote mowers and use of things like that. Even before COVID, John Deere was prototyping drone sprayers, exactly what you said. And certainly there are clubs out there that are using it. I don't think we're at the point yet that the cost-effective piece has come through, but the cost-effective piece is going to be driven by the cost of labor, right? And it's a crazy thing to think about, and you watch, unfortunately, the conflicts around the world, but it seems to be drone warfare everywhere, right? So if I can conduct battlefield operations with a drone, you'd think I could spray the golf course or some part of it. Yeah. And there are certainly people in the industry that are absolutely 100% will tell you that the day is coming that, a lot of your grounds crew, it's going to convert to, they're going to be sitting in golf course maintenance, working drones, not out, you're going to have people out there probably for detailed work. But a lot of those big issues, I think technology is going to come in. I think smarter irrigation systems are going to come in, which obviously, and where do we get our water from and things like that. Food and beverage, it's hard to see that in a private club.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you coming in today to talk to us. So thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you.